Well, at least I can say I shot my dinner. Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here with Tex Grebner Out. Every culture to an extent has had a god or goddess of the bow, as well as a god or goddess of the hunt. There is great magic within a bow, and there is incredible mysticism in the act of nature worship that is hunting. And so, I want you, when I shoot this arrow, to hear what I hear. The twang and the swish of Apollo's lyre. In Greek mythology, Apollo was the god of the bow, and Artemis was the goddess of the hunt. The music of Apollo's lyre. And that's only in Greek mythology. The act of hunting is a religious act, even for a Christian, Catholic, Muslim, or Jew. And if you're pagan, then you probably already understand what I'm talking about, because there has always been a god or goddess of the hunt. Animals within Native American culture, and all over the world for that matter, have been given godlike properties. Because if you get within arrow distance of an animal, at that point the hunt is no longer in your hands. Which is why us archers and bow hunters, myself being both, fixate on our gear so much, because at that point the hunt is no longer in our hands. And I say Christianity and Catholicism, which is my personal religion, but Catholicism worships the hunt to an extent, or at the very least approves of the hunt, because a sparrow does not fall lest my Father notice. My interpretation of that statement by Jesus is that if you're going to take an animal out of this world, at that point, if you do it in a righteous manner, it's not up to you. That animal is a gift from God. Or, in religions other than Catholicism or Christianity and such, in polytheistic religions, it is a gift from the gods, or the particular god or goddess of the hunt. Now, it is an incredibly exhilarating thing to send an arrow into flesh. The head, the shaft, the blood flowing forth, and you feel alive. Now, what I've just said probably sounds dirty to you, but for lack of better words, hunting with a bow and arrow is an act of fertility. In the words of my best friend Lambdog76 here on YouTube, the price of life is death. And so if you can harvest an animal, you eat the meat, you wear the skin, at that point, you and the animal are hunting together again. Because you have consumed the animal's flesh, and now that animal, somewhere inside of you, is a part of you. And just with the bow, I choose traditional archery because I feel that I have a greater connection to the act of hunting, hunting being an act of nature worship. And to be quite honest with you, there are things about archery and things about hunting that that you have to experience for yourself, that I cannot explain because I myself do not understand them. And there has always been in cultures a goddess or god of the hunt, and there has always been a god or goddess of the bow. And that is why I choose to be both an archer and a bow hunter. And if you want to enjoy the spiritual medicine of archery and bow hunting, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I can help you. In the second portion of this video, I'm going to be going over just how easy and cost-effective it is to become an archer. The bow has life, and you have life, and the price of life is death. A tree had to die to make this bow. The beef that I ate, granted I shot the steak, but the beef that I ate had to die, and that gives me life. And just as there is a curve of the bow, Apollo was also the god of the sun, east to west across the sky. And of course, without the sun, none of us could be alive with the grace of God. And so I hope you'll join me on this journey in the magic of archery. And I hope you'll begin your journey as well, because all journeys begin with a first step. I can point you in the right direction, but this quest is yours if you choose it. Each one of these arrows is unique. Every person is unique. Every bow is unique. And you need to match both the arrow, the bow, and the person to each other. Now, as you can see, two of these arrows have a pattern below the feathers. Two of these arrows just have fletching on them. I choose to use a cresting wrap on some of my arrows that I would hunt with because I find that it adds a personal touch, my own medicine. And so I have two run-of-the-mill arrows here, and I have two medicine arrows that I would use for hunting. Every bow is unique, every person is unique, and every bow is going to like a certain arrow, and every person is going to like a certain bow and arrow combination. The reason that I show you these is not only to explain the concept of creating a medicine arrow, but also to show you that archery, a religion in itself, is like any other religion in that you should not judge someone according to how they choose to practice their religion. In this arrow line, I have some very high-end arrows, and I have some very low-end arrows. I have some carbon, I have some wood, and I have some aluminum carbon hybrids. I have some with feathers, and I have one with plastic vanes. The purpose of the vanes and feathers is actually to guide the arrow once it leaves the bow, to keep it spinning, which makes it travel better in a straight line. The reason that I have an arrow here with plastic vanes rather than feathers is because plastic vanes are in fact waterproof. With that being said, though, feathers were made to fly. So you have to choose the medicine that is right for you. Now, with certain modifications on a bow, you can potentially modify the bow to shoot perfectly with plastic vanes and no need for feathers. I find that most people get scared off from enjoying archery because they think that they need to have a setup like a fly fisherman. And that simply isn't the case. you can get into archery and enjoy archery very much to its fullest for not a lot of money, considering the spiritual return on your investment. Here you see two of my traditional bows. Both of these are recurve bows. The bow on the left is a takedown bow. The bow on the right is a one-piece bow made of laminated wood and fiberglass. Both of these are made of laminated wood and fiberglass. But you can spend, within certain parameters, to get the basics that I will show you later on, you can spend the bare minimum amount of money, or, just like with the arrows, you can spend an exorbitant amount of money if you choose to. My advice is to get a Magick Sage, which is the bow on the left of the screen, because it is a takedown bow that will allow you to easily transport your gear, and also it is much more cost effective to figure out if you actually like archery to buy a takedown bow, be it a Magick Sage or a Martin Jaguar, before you would pay for a one-piece high-end bow. As I say, these are both laminated bows. Both of them are recurves. But as you can see on the Sage, I have it outfitted with a wire rest. That wire rest allows me to shoot the plastic vanes. Now, as most arrows these days do not come with feathers, having an elevated rest that is a wire rest that I will provide you a link to, that allows me and you to shoot arrows straight off the shelf without having to do any custom fletching. When I say shelf, I do not mean, in this case, the arrow shelf. Personally, I love shooting off of the arrow shelf itself, because the arrow shelf, having constant contact with both the arrow, my fingers on the string, my hand on the center portion of the bow at the grip, which is known as the riser, that gives me a closer attachment to what I am doing. But with all of this being said, you can spend as little money as you want, or as much money as you want. This bow is actually the Martin Howitt Hunter in 75 pounds. This bow is a Magick Sage 3-piece takedown in 50 pounds. But you can spend as much money or as little money as you want and practice the religion that is archery in your own way. There's no sense in buying a high-end bow if you don't know if archery is for you. But creating medicine arrows, matching them to your bow, and then shooting at a target, or even better, harvesting game, the animal sacrificing itself to you in an act of worship, so much the better. For both good medicine in the hunting grounds and safety in practice, it is important that you use the proper arrow for the bow that you're using. The draw weight of your bow, being the amount of force required to bring the bow from brace height, which is its resting position, to a full draw of 28 inches, is measured in pounds. that is the draw weight of the bow. For instance, this bow here is a 75-pound bow. The draw weight on this bow is only 50. Now, if I were to repeatedly shoot an arrow that is too light for the 75-pound bow, I could damage my equipment or potentially hurt myself because the arrow could break on the bow. And it is also very bad medicine when hunting, because we want to absorb as much magic energy from the bow itself into the arrow so that we give the animal an honorable and clean death. Most of you will not be shooting with a traditional bow like a recurve that I have here. You won't be shooting a 75-pound draw. You will probably be shooting a 40, 50, maybe even a 55-pound draw. You will measure your arrow, and then from your arrow, there will be a table when you buy your arrows on the box that tells you how many grains per inch the arrow is. Arrows are measured in grains just like powder and bullet weight is measured in grains. But you will take your arrow weight, grains per inch, and multiply it, and then add that to your point weight. And you want to get at least 8 to 9 grains per pound of draw weight in your total arrow weight. This arrow for the Sage is 535 grains, and this arrow for my Hunter is 75 pounds, so I use a 750 grain arrow. An interesting side note on that is that using 10 grains per pound of draw weight for this 50-pound bow and 10 grains per pound of draw weight for this 75-pound bow allows me to trade between them and have very similar impact points when using the same technique, which allows me to shoot both bows equally well depending on what I'm doing. But we want to have safe tackle so that we don't damage ourselves or our equipment, and we want to make sure that we go into the hunting grounds with good medicine. Now, what do you need to get into archery? Firstly, you need a bow. Next, you need arrows. There's also 2 pieces of safety equipment that you also need. The arm guard and the shooting glove. And to help you, this portion here is known as a nocking point. The nocking point allows you to have a constant reference for where your arrow is on the string. As I said, on this particular bow, I have it outfitted with a flipper rest. This one is by NAP, but this rest allows you to shoot your everyday store arrows straight off of the shelf with plastic vanes. Later on, if you decide that you want to go to feathers, you can always strip the vanes off, put a cresting wrap on the arrow to give it your own medicine, and then add your own feathers. Now, as you can see, the arrow has 2 different colors. it has the red and it has the white. The white feather, or white vein in this case, is known as the cock vein. Yeah, sounds dirty. But when arrows used feathers, if you think about a hen pheasant versus a cock pheasant, the cock pheasant has brightly colored plumage. The hen pheasant is much more dull colored. And that is the feather, or the vein, that you would place opposite to the riser of the bow. The riser being the center portion of the bow where the bow does not bend and where you are gripping. You will also need field points and or matched broadheads. But for right now, all you really need to get into archery is the bow, the arrows. You may need to modify the bow with an elevated flipper rest, as I have done, and you need a nocking point, a shooting glove or a shooting tab, an arm guard, and of course, as you can see, I have it all resting against a target. Now, I will go through exactly where to find all of this, but now that you know what you need to become an archer, you're one step closer to becoming a bow hunter. As promised, here is the buyer's guide that you have been waiting for. I use a Damascus style glove. This is actually the glove that I own. So we need a shooting glove. I prefer gloves over a shooting tab. However, you can, of course, use just bare fingers, but unless you have the hands of an archer already, this is very important safety equipment to prevent blisters and potential damage to your fingers. So we're going to add that to the cart, selecting my size, large. This is the exact arm guard that I use. It's good, thickly padded, and I like the animalistic design. That's part of my own personal medicine. It only comes in one size, and so we are going to add that to the cart. Also, in order to safely string a traditional bow, it is best to use a bow stringer. So we are just going to add that to the cart while we are at it. Now we need a nocking point for our string. This portion here is known as a bow square. You want to set your nocking point using the bow square. This is the pliers that you will get for setting the nocking point, and these here are the actual nocking points themselves. We will add that to the cart as well. And now we come to selecting a bow. No matter which bow we choose out of this list, the nocking points, the stringer, the glove, the arm guard are all necessary equipment. This is, of course, the Magick Sage, which is the bow that I featured earlier in this video. Right-handed or left-handed. Now here it refers to the brace height. As I said, we added the kit with the bow square, which will help you measure your brace height. Now for a male shooter, I recommend the 50-pound draw, because your average male can handle a 50-pound draw very easily over time. And not to insult women in any way, but they're not quite as mesomorphic as males are. And so I generally recommend for a female shooter to start out with 40-pound limbs. And you can actually purchase replacement limbs at cost later on if you ever wear out your limbs or you decide that you want to upgrade. So we're going to select the 50-pound right hand. As you can see, the price there. So we'll add that to the cart as well. Now we get to the rest options for the Samick Sage that I've selected. This is for shooting off of the shelf. Imagine the bow's riser being here. You place this spacer onto the side of the riser and you lay this bear hair rug onto the arrow shelf. If you are choosing to use feathered arrows, such as these, you would be able to use that type of rest. So that is added to the cart as well. These are longbow maker arrows with feathers if you choose to use that for your arrow medicine. The other rest option is this, which is the wire rest, which would allow you to actually shoot any arrow, either the arrow with vanes or an arrow with feathers. You would just have to adjust your knocking point accordingly, but we will skip that for now. If you are using what I have mentioned so far, we'll just go to the cart. And I did actually forget we would need a target. This is a hurricane bag target. And so we will add that to the cart as well. So we're going to have a look in our cart and see where we actually sit right now as far as price. We have our shooting glove. We have our arm guard. We have our bowstringer. We have our tuning kit. We have the Sage in 50 pounds. We have the plate and hair rest. And we have the feathered arrows for that bow. And we have a target. That is our price before shipping. However, if you choose to use carbon arrows, we're just going to delete this from the cart, and we're going to delete this rest from the cart. And so this here for this Samick Sage is going to stay the same. Target and Sage, knocking points, tuning kit, bowstringer, and arm guard and glove. So time traveling back as I find the tabs, if you choose to use this rest, the NAP flipper rest, as you can see it's literally called a flipper rest, we'll add that to the cart. These are fiberglass arrows. They're safe to shoot with a bow up to 55 pounds. Our bow is 50. These do not have feathers, but they're a starter arrow, so we will add those to the cart as well. This is another arrow option that I will come back to. And so we're just going to refresh our cart. We have our current price of $318 with our dozen fiberglass practice arrows, our flipper rest for use with our Sage, Still the same bag target, the bow tuning kit, the stringer, and our arm guard and glove. So that is that price. However, I am going to delete that arrow, leave the rest, and then go back to this. This is the Carbon Express pile driver. It is a blazer fletched arrow that I have used in the past. As you can see here, the arrows are, well, it doesn't tell you, but what I will tell you from my own experience is they are, in fact, 10 grains per inch, 10.5 grains per inch, and they are a 30-inch arrow, so it will give you plenty of arrow weight. And so we would need a field point with this, so we'll add a pack of field points for those. Pile drivers are 5/16 field points, by the way. So we will add our field points, and we will add our 250 pile drivers to complement our 50-pound bow. And now we will refresh our cart. As you can see, we are now $400 into this with our dozen arrows that are pre-fletched, our dozen field points, our flipper rest, our bag target, still using the sage, bow tuning kit for setting our nocking point and measuring our brace height, limb saber, which is our bow stringer, the Vista arm guard still, and the Damascus shooting glove. And so that is our grand total according to a dozen fletched arrows plus field points plus the archery rest that I recommend and everything. So now I'm going to remove, or I should say just leave this alone, remove this rest. And keep in mind, I'm quoting this without shipping price. We're going to remove the sage, though I do like the sage. This is the Martin Jaguar. It is an excellent bow, and I have in fact used the Jaguar in the past. The only downside of this versus a sage is that you need an Allen wrench to take it apart. It's, however, made in America by Martin, and so we have our Martin Jaguar 50-pound. It also comes in 40-pound for the same price roughly. And with this one, as you can see, we would need a different arrow rest because the shelf is made from a compound riser that has had recurve limbs put on it. So we're going to add that to our cart, and we would need to use this flipper rest, which is a center rest flipper, and this is what we would use for our Jaguar. As you can see here, it screws together, and you would need to set your actual rest up to where the arrow is directly in the center of the string, but that is a good up-close view of the actual flipper rest. This is for the right-handed bow. The Jaguar only comes in right-handed risers, and so that is the center rest by NAP. And of course, we're going to look at our cart, $420
50-pound Jaguar, NAP center rest, and of course, pile driver 250s, our field points, target, tuning kit, and bowstringer, arm guard, and shooting glove. As I said, these are prices quoted without the actual shipping included, but depending on the setup that you choose, you could get completely into archery under $500.
As I said, an arrow shot off of an elevated rest, even with plastic vanes, can be effective and is a very cost-effective way of getting started in archery. I hope that this video is helpful to you on your quest to become both a bow hunter and an archer. As always, God bless all my sportsmen of America. Join the NRA to protect our rights. Please check out my friends over at legallyconcealed.org. Thank you very much to those of you involved in law enforcement and those of you serving in the military. And thanks for watching Texas Grebner Outdoors.